Hello and welcome to another edition of the NB Update. This program is brought to you by the NB Media Co-op in collaboration with our friends at CHCO Television. The NB Media Co-op looks at the world through a social justice lens. If you like what we do, please support us. Go to our online publication, nbmediacoop.org, and click on Join the Co-op/donate. Today on the show, the housing crisis continues to grip communities across Canada, including here in New Brunswick. A recent film screening and discussion looked at solutions that go beyond market forces of supply and demand. Dozens of people braved cold and icy conditions for the event at the Moncton Public Library, where there were practically no empty seats for the Sunday afternoon screening. It was the New Brunswick launch of a documentary titled Thinking Beyond the Market, a film about genuinely affordable housing, by University of Waterloo planning professor Brian Doucet. The film looks at examples from across the country, including the Maritimes. In Prince Edward Island, a 2% rent cap is tied to the unit, not to the renter. That means that, unlike in New Brunswick, where a 3% rent cap is in place, landlords on the island aren't allowed to jack up the rent when the unit is vacant. Filmmaker Brian Doucet says P.E.I. has the best rent control system in the country.
And definitely the difference between P.E.I. and other parts of the country is in P.E.I. that rule applies whether or not the unit is empty or occupied. In other words, if you're renting an apartment for $1,000 a month, if you leave and I rent it, in P.E.I. that's still going to be $1,000 or maybe $1,050 a month apartment. In most other parts of Canada, if you left that $1,000 a month apartment and I moved in, I might be paying $1,700, $1,800, $1,900.
But advocates say there's at least one problem with the P.E.I. system. Without some kind of public registry in place, tenants don't know what the legal rent should be unless they ask a previous tenant, which is often impossible. In 2021, P.E.I. resident Darcy Lanthier launched a crowdsourced rent registry so that people could check it out for themselves. She's featured in the film.
Because any of these increases, it's against the law.
It's against the law.
Why is it so important to have some sort of rental registry?
Well, that's where the evidence is. We had fantastic rules, but no enforcement.
Lanthier was also part of a panel discussion at the Moncton event, along with 3 New Brunswick-based housing researchers.
And when I asked the question on Twitter, are you paying too much rent? On my brand new account that had 22 followers, I had to shut off my phone for the notifications because worldwide I had more than, it's like 10 million views. I got 10,000 followers, and it was this question of, are you paying too much rent? It's not a New Brunswick issue, it's not a P.E.I. issue, it's not a Canadian issue. It's an everywhere issue. It's a human right, and it's one that we've traded off in almost all markets to speculators.
We'll have more highlights from that panel discussion in a moment. But first, here are the voices of some of the people who turned out for the Moncton event, which was organized by the Riverview Riding Association of the New Brunswick Green Party.
Hi, my name is Karen Rogers. I'm the current president of the Riverview New Brunswick Green Party Association. We felt it was really important for our community to see that there are solutions to this, and that it means that a lot of organizations can come together, as well as the various levels of our government, to find solutions. It's not impossible. We need to collaborate, and we need to be considering housing more as a human right.
There was regional representation here of P.E.I. where they have a stronger, he says the strongest rent control system in the country. Do you think New Brunswick should follow suit and implement that kind of program?
That's a great example in P.E.I. because, yes, provincially they took action legislatively, but it was really a community member who actually put in place a system where it was actually enforceable. So that you can see where a variety of people and organizations can work together to get the best solutions for our community. So yes, I think that is extremely doable.
My name is Charles Legier. I'm a city councillor of the city of Moncton. The takeaway would be that a lot of municipalities have been creative in some of the bylaws that they've enacted. They've not necessarily waited for the province to, do a wide a change. They've enacted change in their municipalities. They've also invested.
My name is Hannah Bell. I'm from Charlottetown, P.E.I. I'm a business consultant and social activist.
And your background as a Green Party MLA, two-term, and the official opposition, you passed housing legislation at the time. Can you talk about that legislation?
Sure. Pretty tough to pass legislation when you're opposition, but we're able to do it. One of them was to regulate Airbnbs, and the other one was a renoviction moratorium, which actually put a halt to any evictions related to renovations for a period of 2 years. Really impactful at the time. It allowed kind of renters in the housing market to catch their breath. We saw in the documentary how devastating it can be to be evicted out of your home when you're a renter. And with an incredibly low vacancy rate that P.E.I. has had for the last few years, it was really important to do something that could directly support renters when they needed it.
Mm. And you talked about the Airbnb ban and how Airbnb was previously taking up a pretty significant part of the housing stock. The legislation changed that effectively.
It definitely didn't do as much as we wanted to. There was a very strong lobby, and there is a very strong lobby against kind of putting any kind of regulations in there. What we were able to do was to get an accurate idea of how many Airbnbs there really were. And up until that point, it had all been speculation. So having some real data that said that it's 5% of our housing market is gone to Airbnbs really caught people's attention and let us then talk about why that needed to change and how it needed to change.
Stay tuned for highlights from the panel discussion, which featured P.E.I. resident Darcy Lanthier and professors Matthew Hayes of St. Thomas University and University of New Brunswick professors Julia Woodhall-Melnick and Tobin LeBlanc-Haley. And full disclosure, LeBlanc-Haley is a member of the NB Media Co-op Board of Directors.
I think this film has a lot of important pieces and makes a real contribution to the national conversation about housing and the things that we can do to improve the situation in Canada. And so, it really covers a lot in accessible terms. It puts developers and government in the hot seat, which I love, both for their tactics and their decision making in the last 40 years. It makes very clear just how profoundly all levels of government in Canada have failed, but also have a responsibility to step into the housing piece. And, they talk about abandonment of housing and affordable housing, and folks who, earn low and modest or moderate incomes have been largely abandoned by the state, and that the public goods that we have built in the country have been left to deteriorate. The infrastructure has been left to rot, and the people who live in public housing or who are waiting on the list for public housing have been left to deal with really serious health-threatening and life-threatening housing situations. And so I really think that is great, and that provides a lot of context. And I think for me, probably one of the strongest and most important pieces of this film comes early, where Carolyn Witzman, who's amazing, says, "You have a right to housing, you don't have a right to choose your neighbors."
There is no right to choose your neighbors. There's a right to housing. The big failure of municipal government is in supporting exclusionary zoning. There's no other word for it. It has taken the majority of most cities' land and said, if you're poor, you can't live here. It's only single-family homes. And that is not a good fit for today's society. I don't think it ever was. It certainly isn't now. The evidence is in. We need to get rid of exclusionary zoning, which was racist and classist and heterosexist. It really sucked, So just get rid of it. We don't need to drag this process on for years.
And the pressures that policymakers are caving to give far too much credence to this notion that you get to decide what gets built in your community, even if it is life-saving infrastructure. And so
in my backyard.
Exactly. Right? I'm trying not to use that word.
That's okay. I have no problem.
It triggers developers.
Yeah.
That kind of attitude, we've seen so much of that. Everything from a very horrific cancellation of what would have been a wonderful supportive housing project in Fredericton, through to, in Moncton, pushback against even just building regular apartment buildings. We have seen this attitude everywhere.
Oh my God, the traffic.
Oh my God, the traffic. Oh my God, I won't be able to see the trees. And we're having conversations about housing that have nothing to do with the fact that people are dying and have to do with things like, well, this isn't the way it looked like when my parents grew up here. And that has to stop.
I think there's one thing that was talked about early on in the film around the need to build density. And I think one of the things as a sociologist that I'd attend to in that are what are the coalitions, the electoral coalitions at the municipal level that align with developers. And the federal government's policy to allow the rezoning of established neighborhoods that are, zoned basically for single-family dwellings is aligned with the interests of landlords and developers who also are buying single-family homes in established neighborhoods in order to speculate on what their future value will be. And I know that also as someone who, thinking about municipal politics, more than 10 years ago, thought, something like more density in established neighborhoods would be a great thing. Not that it's not a great thing, but I wouldn't want to be a municipal councillor anywhere in Canada right now, because it's almost as though the federal policy, it's trying to continue to build a consensus, a social consensus that is, it's a growth coalition. So it's a consensus that is beneficial to developers to build as much housing as possible in any condition. And it's going to run into opposition for reasons that are not hard to understand. People have bought into single-family neighborhoods. They're attached to the neighborhood style. And the whole blow-up around this that's going to happen, if, and I say with a big if because I'm actually not sure that the measures that the federal government is taking on this are going to really move the needle very much. But where there will be projects, it's going to create a distraction. Which is going to be about, not in my backyard versus, supposedly progressive policies of urban, construction, renewal, and whatnot. When in reality, many of the much lower hanging fruit to preserving affordable housing and to creating new affordable housing is not going to be found in those established neighborhoods. If we look at here in Moncton, where is the most housing being constructed right now? Where is the place where we could have the biggest impact? It's on the city's edge. That's where you see a densification happening without any adequate transport infrastructure. So it's not for nothing that people are talking about the traffic implications of this. We don't have a public transit policy in New Brunswick. There's no bylaw that would require that these new developments also incorporate 20 or 30% of deeply affordable housing units. There's not enough non-market housing for all the reasons that this documentary kind of drew attention to. So there's all kinds of opportunities actually to put our eggs in that basket rather than trying to think only in terms of building in established neighborhoods, which is going to be, I think, pretty limited to begin with and is going to be more divisive than necessary.
The ability to earn a profit on your real estate is not a human right. We should just start there and stay focused there. Housing is a human right. Your ability to profit from them, we don't care. And so when landlords whine, then we should tell them exactly what they should go do with themselves. Yeah. So, and that's I am a landlord. I had a big house in the country. I had a little house. I made it bigger and bigger and bigger as my family grew. I got 3 boys, they're giants, and then all their friends, of course. So when I downsized, when my kids moved out, I converted my house into a 4-unit apartment. And there was some funding to build 4-unit apartments, and I went to the province and I said, here's my proposal. I'm going to build a 4-unit apartment, and it's not going to cost $90,000 a door, which was the budget. I can build this whole thing, because I already own the house, for $75,000. I can put in 4 affordable units. I'll sign them all over to the province. You can keep them affordable units in perpetuity. I'm happy to do that. And they said, we don't really have much call for apartments in Mermaid. So Mermaid is like 10 kilometers. It's a 10-kilometer walk exactly from my door to Province House. So I had to build these 4 units by myself because clearly they're not interested in helping me. And it took a little bit longer. But there hasn't been a single day when they haven't been rented. Not a single day. There's a lineup. There's a wait list to get an apartment in my place. And there's so many opportunities to do things like that, to build density. And that was a house on a 3-acre property. I turned it into a 4-unit. I took 10 years to get permission to subdivide an acre off that property to build another house on it. So we need housing. We want more density, but then when we try to build it, somebody's ready to stand in our way. So there's just this, my advice is just to be as loud and persistent as you possibly can, reminding folks that people have a right to a roof over their head, not a shelter where you can't leave your stuff, but a safe, warm, private place with a door that can lock behind you, and everyone, I don't care who they are, every single human being should have that right to that kind of housing.
Yes. Very interesting film. I guess initial thoughts is like what Darcy said, that's great. Housing is a human right, again, what Tobin and Matthew have reiterated as well too, Carolyn's words, again, Carolyn's a friend and a colleague of mine, and the words from Carolyn that you don't get to choose your neighbor really stuck out to me as well too. Right now in my own neighborhood, and I'm in St. John, a big thing that we're seeing is actually the province put up 20 apartment units or 20 units of apartment housing right in my neighborhood, and I'm absolutely thrilled about it, but the for sale signs could not have gone up fast enough. So we're actually seeing a lot of the NIMBYism in action as people are looking to move out to Rothsay or Quispam to move away from affordable housing that they see as being deeply problematic. And, to me, I think, okay, good luck, get out, that's fine by me. But it really sends a message about how we view affordable housing and how we view the people who live in it. We are seeing so much hardship all across the country. And this didn't just happen. It comes from a long history of decision making at the federal level and in New Brunswick at the provincial level and increasingly at the municipal level in New Brunswick. And that's missing from the film for me, that broader context. There is not a robust conversation about financialization. There's not a conversation about the fact that this transcends parties. Right? So what happened at the federal level when we started to see the defunding, the really aggressive defunding of social housing under the Conservatives and the Liberals, it was both. And I know it's the Green Party, so you guys are yes, of course, yeah. But I really felt that was missing from the film. The film does a really good job of accessibly explaining a lot of the initiatives that people are taking, are doing a really good job of explaining a lot of the barriers that some of these initiatives are facing. But what I felt was missing from the film was a really hard look at the critical policy decisions that have been made in the last 40 years that have gotten us here.
The relation of power, I think, between tenants and landlords is something that should also be reflected on. So this is a relation of power. Every month or every year in New Brunswick, people who rent transfer collectively $735 million to landlords, and this is just the primary market. So that's $735 million that is going towards building equity for people who already own homes and who own more homes, who have an excess of homes. And so much of what's happening right now, it's what we call the housing crisis is really just capitalism in the station of accumulation in housing.
In Prince Edward Island, 5 years ago, we had the lowest vacancy rate in Canada.
0.8%.
0.8%. Wow. So not 8%, 0.8%. That was our vacancy rate. And why? Because 5% of our housing in Charlottetown was locked into Airbnbs. So taking long-term housing and buying it just to rent it out as a ghost hotel, not paying commercial taxes, not paying commercial insurance, having these in residential neighborhoods. In a residential neighborhood where God himself couldn't build a 32-unit apartment building, seniors friendly to get people out of their 5-bedroom homes and into something more modest. In those kinds of neighborhoods, people were just putting up these ghost hotels everywhere where you don't get to know your neighbors because every weekend it's somebody different and they're just there to party. So we had municipalities say they would curtail it and then they chickened out. We had the province kind of make people register them, but still it's an issue. But if you're gonna buy a home and then sell other people that they can't live in it, you're on the wrong side of this issue. Sorry.
Just to chime in a little bit on what Darcy said. The P.E.I. rental registry that you put together just demonstrating that, and I don't know, are there children in the room? Because what do you tell me? Any kids?
No, you're all right.
Well, adults? Okay. Darcy the bad. So back last December when Tobin, Matthew, and I were in the legislature pushing for a rent cap against the Killam lobbyists and against the then leader or the CEO or whatever you want to call him, of president of the New Brunswick Apartments Owner Association. One of the big things that we were pushing for was a form of, vacancy control. And we were told it can't be done because there's no way to track it. So I'd just like to say that Darcy, that is absolutely amazing. And it's a great way to show how, we often feel disheartened as activists and as scholars that are working in a space where change is slow and change is hard. And, yes, we need policy change and we need our policymakers on side with us, but this just shows you that someone who cares and grassroots movements can really make a difference and move the needle. So my big question for the province of New Brunswick would be, if Darcy can create a rent registry off the side of her desk while having a full-time job and no funding, why can't you?
After Premier Susan Holt's Liberal Party came to power in November 2024, they fulfilled an election promise by instituting a rent cap at 3%, but it did not include vacancy control. Now, for this report, we reached out to Housing Minister David Hickey to ask if the province is considering the P.E.I. model. Now, a spokesperson didn't respond to that interview request, but provided a brief statement. It didn't respond directly to our questions, but stated that NB Housing is currently in the process of reviewing the Residential Tenancies Act, the RTA, and part of that process is meeting with stakeholders, community partners, landlords, and tenants across the province. It also stated in part that the province is collecting more data as part of this process. It said, quote, "We'll have more to share on the Residential Tenancies Act review in the months ahead. We're doing our best to speak to as many New Brunswickers as possible so we can get this right." The NB Media Co-op will continue to follow this story as it unfolds. That's all for today's edition of the NB Update. Reporting from Moncton for the NB Media Co-op, this is journalist David Gordon Koch. And if you like what we do, remember, please go to our flagship online publication, nbmediacoop.org, and click on Join the Co-op/donate. Thanks for tuning in.